When an alien armada descended on Earth, humanity's government surrendered in minutes. Our militaries were obsolete. Our weapons were toys. But the aliens made one catastrophic error. They underestimated the one thing America holds sacred. By the time they realized their mistake, it was already too late. What happened next would change the course of intergalactic history forever. Part 1. The Descent. The morning the Tharaxians arrived, Dr. Sarah Chen was fishing off the coast of Virginia in her restored 1987 Chris-Craft Corsair cabin cruiser, a boat she'd inherited from her grandfather and spent 15 years restoring. She didn't have her radio on. She didn't need it. The sky above the Atlantic turned from blue to an impossible, sickly green. 3 massive ships descended through the clouds, each one easily the size of a small mountain. They were sleek, geometric, covered in lights that pulsed with an intelligence humanity had never known. Sarah's boat rocked violently from the pressure wave alone. She gripped the wheel, her weathered hands shaking as she watched humanity's final moments begin. Within 12 hours, every world government had surrendered. The Tharaxians transmitted a simple message. Your civilization will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. Your weapons are primitive. Your defenses are non-existent. We own this planet now. President Mitchell addressed the nation from the White House bunker, his face gray with defeat. The military chiefs of staff stood beside him, silent and broken. Humanity had lasted less than a day against extraterrestrial conquest. But the Tharaxians had made a fatal miscalculation. Part TWO, The Gathering. Admiral James Bull Richardson had commanded the United States Navy for 8 years. When the surrender order came, he was aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford in the Atlantic. He sat in his quarters and wept, not from fear, but from rage. Then his communication officer arrived with a priority message. It wasn't from the Pentagon. It was from the fishing community. Over the next 72 hours, something extraordinary happened. Every recreational boat owner in America received a simple, encrypted message. Report to Norfolk. Bring your vessel. Come armed. Come now. Fishermen, boat enthusiasts, yacht owners, Coast Guard volunteers, people who had spent their lives on the water, who knew their vessels like they knew their own hearts. They came from Texas, California, Florida, the Great Lakes, the Hudson River. Some of them had served in the military decades ago. Others had never fired a gun. But they all shared one thing. They loved their boats with a passion that transcended logic. Sarah Chen received a message on an encrypted frequency her grandfather, a Navy SEAL, had once taught her to monitor. Without hesitation, she fired up her Chris-Craft's engines and pointed the boat toward Virginia. The gathering point was Norfolk Naval Station. What they found shocked them. Admiral Richardson stood on a dock overlooking 500 boats of every conceivable type. Trawlers, sailboats, speedboats, houseboats, luxury yachts, fishing charters, tugboats, even a retired paddle-wheeler. They filled the harbor like a swarm of metal locusts, each one crewed by Americans who had a very different idea about surrender. Welcome, Admiral Richardson said simply, addressing the assembled captains and crew members who had gathered on the dock. The government has surrendered, but we haven't, and I'm betting the Tharaxians have never encountered anything like what we're about to do. Part 3. The Trap. The Tharaxians' main fleet hung in low orbit above the Atlantic. They had noticed the gathering of civilian vessels, but found it amusing. Their artificial intelligence assessed the threat level at 0.003%. These small, slow, pathetically weak ships were no concern. That was their mistake. Admiral Richardson's plan was simple, beautifully, devastatingly simple. The Tharaxian ships relied on advanced gravity technology. It was their primary weapon system and their main means of propulsion. But like all advanced technology, it had a weakness. It operated on a narrow frequency band that the American military had managed to reverse engineer in the aftermath of the first contact. What the Tharaxians didn't know was that every single boat in that convoy had been rigged with modified equipment, electromagnetic pulse generators, amplified and focused through a network that the Navy had spent 3 days constructing. The boats themselves would be bait, but their real weapon was far older than any starship. At precisely 0400 hours on the 4th day, the civilian fleet divided into 3 groups and departed Norfolk. They moved into open water, spreading out across 1,000 square miles of the Atlantic. The Tharaxians took the bait. 3 massive alien warships descended through the atmosphere. Their sensors locked onto the scattered fleet. They fired. For a brief, terrifying moment, Americans died. 3 fishing boats vaporized in brilliant blue plasma fire. Sarah Chen watched it happen on her navigation screen, her hands gripping the wheel as her crew of volunteers looked at her with eyes full of terror. "Keep formation," she ordered quietly. "Trust the Admiral." Then, as the alien ships repositioned for another strike, Admiral Richardson gave the signal. The electromagnetic pulse detonated. Part 4. The Reckoning. It started with 500 boats moving in perfect synchronization, their modified electromagnetic systems creating a focused, cascading wave of pure energy directed at a narrow frequency band. The pulse wasn't strong enough to destroy a Tharaxian warship. Nothing in human arsenal was. But it was strong enough to disrupt their gravity drive core for exactly 37 seconds. 37 seconds was all they needed. From submarines concealed in the depths, American missiles, the old-fashioned kind, the kind that didn't need fancy technology, just velocity and explosives, launched at the moment the alien ship's shields collapsed. Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, weapons that humanity had perfected over 70 years of warfare. They were obsolete against an enemy with advanced defenses, but they weren't obsolete against an enemy with no defenses at all. The first Tharaxian warship simply fell. It didn't explode. It didn't vaporize. It fell from the sky like a mountain crashing to earth, hitting the Atlantic and sending up a column of water that was visible from the shore. The shockwave capsized 3 civilian boats, but their crews were rescued within minutes by the others. The second and third ships attempted to fire, but their weapon systems took critical damage from cascading missile strikes. One ship managed to limp back toward the upper atmosphere, but not before an EMP from a speedboat captained by an 83-year-old retired Navy engineer knocked out its navigation core. It crashed into the Potomac River. The third ship exploded midair.